Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quake Magic gameplay. This time around we are on Shimmer's Ward playing as Brettonia against the High Elves. And once again, a whole bunch of peasants, a whole bunch of knights. It's a pretty conventional build. My opponent though decided to bring something that I'm not that used to seeing, though it has become a little more popular lately. And that is of course that Death Ball of Sisters. So we'll see how we can do against it. For my lord, I did bring the Fanchantress. I say this every time on basically every Brettonia video. I think she's the most competitive Brettonian lord pick. Okay melee stats, all things considered. Mist of the Lady, stupidly resistant to magic, built-in physical resist, missile resist. Chalice of Potions, great for bombarding troops. Heals for days, thanks to Arcane Conduit, as well as having Lore of Life. Favor of the Fae. And Mist of the Lady, yeah, so she's just strong all around. Honestly, there's nothing bad to say about her. She also does bring fear to the table, which, again, some factions can be nifty. Because Brettonia doesn't have too many units that can do that. Especially not on a budget, like the Fanchantress can. For our front line here, nothing fancy. A bunch of men-at-arms with shields to soak up arrows and to soak up the High Elf hate. They're not there to win the game. They're just there to die and provide a front line. They're backed by 3 peasant mobs, once again, to soak up the charges. Peasant Bowman of Fire was providing some fire support, no pun intended. These guys, of course, can actually do quite a bit of damage to High Elf archers, especially if they're distracted by something a tad more valuable, such as, for example, Grail Knights. Single unit of Grail Guardians in the back, 2 Grail Knights on either end. These guys will, of course, dumpster any High Elf heavy cav, and they'll trash dragons, they'll run over any High Elf infantry. They are probably the hardest counter to the High Elves that exist in this entire game. It's honestly, it's pretty brutal what Grail Knights can do to High Elves. It's a struggle. This is not a good matchup for the High Elves. But regardless, these guys can definitely run amok. They can definitely run over, say, spearmen. And if they get into the backline, they'll do a lot of hurt. However, against Sisters of Avalorn, they could be in for a bad time. My opponent here, going with a bit of a death ball of shooting. Now, for his front line, some spears, some White Lions, some Swordmasters of Hoeth, so pretty elite stuff. I don't think Swordmasters are that good of a pick, to be quite frank. They're honestly, they're too good for Brettonia. I think you're better off bringing Phoenix Guard to get that anti-large. It's more valuable than crushing peasants extra well with Swordmasters of Oath, which is all these guys really do. For his shooting line, my opponent, my firing line, my opponent, which did bring 2 Sisters of Avalorn as well as the Everqueen's Court Guards. They are backed by Alith Anar himself, who does have a whole bunch of buffs on him. He's got Stone of Midnight, which provides some missile resist. He's got Dark in the Skies, plus 20 reload skill, which is ridiculous. For those of you who have seen my video on reload speed, that's going to be roughly 22% faster reload speed on the normal Sisters. Then we do have a Handmaiden of the Everqueen, providing another, I do believe, 15%. She's got plus 10 with Quicksilver Shot, plus 5 with Horn of Isha, so another plus 15%, and plus 10% with Enchanted Spyglass. So a lot of bonus missile damage, and you can see already my opponent firing away with Alith Anar, being an absolute menace. On the periphery here, we do have a Mage of Life, who does have Lore of Life, obviously. No fancy Winds of Magic generating items, Regrowth, Earthblood, Life Bloom, so nothing too fancy. Now, this game is going to be a bit of a, in some ways, I suppose, comedy of errors from my part. And it's more of a this was in many ways more of a discussion game, and I will get up to that in a little bit. You can see I'm trying to close the gap here with my infantry, trying to be a little cautious, not letting my archers and my Grail Guardians get immediately wrecked by the shooting. Here we do get a little greedy. I underestimate the range on the High Elf units, and so we're going to take a few volleys. And you can see they fire so quickly, especially with the buffs to all these buffs. If we look at the reload speed, let's say the Everqueen Court Guard here, 65 damage, 3.5 second reload speed. That's how much stacked, that stacked reduction does. 5.5 on the normal Sisters. Now over here you can see I'm going to dive in from the flanks, and this is where things are going to get a little hairy. My opponent here has collapsed back with his spears. I'm playing very badly here. What I should have done here is honestly waited for my infantry to clash, let the archers do some work, and get the Grail Guardians in around, or Grail Knights around the side. Instead, I act in an incredibly greedy manner. I simply pile these Grail Knights into the flank. I pile some of these guys into the White Lines of Crates. You see these Grail Knights getting absolutely shredded by those volleys of missile fire. But you know what? My own archers, whittling down these Sisters from the flank. Of course, these guys don't have the best of armor, so they're not going to hold up that well. My opponent here clipping me a little bit with the White Lions, and yet the Grail Knights keep going. They ply straight into braced spears. These aren't normal. These aren't just, moving spears like you see all that often. They're plying into braced spears. Second year Grail Knights here, because these guys are now unbraced, are just going to pile through And we're going for the jugular. We're going straight into the sisters, who are now going to be shut down. An entire unit of Grail Knights eradicated over here. These guys shattered on 6 models. They completely shattered. They fell apart. And yet now we are in the back line. And just watch as things disintegrate. Over here, white lines were just piling in all over the place. It's a really stupid move. Fey Enchantress is in the pits here, fighting against these Swordmasters with the help of our Grail Guardian escort. She is dropping a Chalice of Potions, so you can see the knights in the pits here, surrounded by spears, getting hit by an anti-large handmaiden in close quarters. Actually basically pushing through their own Chalice of Potions here. My opponent does try to pull back and immediately gets hammered from the flank by a near healthy full unit of Grail Knights. And like I said, this has not been ideal play at all, and already my opponent's backline is completely wrecked. These Sisters of Avalon are down to 14 models, getting peppered down. The Fire Archers now shifting target. But due to their low AP, they're not going to do very much to the Grail Knights. They're basically going to do nothing. But at the same time, they are providing some valuable support. And you can see these Sisters of Avalon are 9 models, just completely destroyed. They're in terrible shape. They're completely in tatters. And they're really not going to be coming back to any effect. Over here, the Sisters of Avalon getting chased down. Single Grail Knights here kind of picking around, getting blocked by all these bodies. And yeah, my opponent has won the infantry fight. That's for sure. That's not entirely shocking. But in the heart of things, Grail Guardians anchoring the line. All these Grail Knights piling through, destroying these Everqueen's Court Guard. Archers constantly whittling away at the Sisters of Avalon, who are trying to flee and get out of the dodge. The Grail Knights here instead just pile in from the flank, hit them from another side, and they're going to be able to rout them off. So 30 models, over half strength still. These Sisters of Avalon are getting forced off the field. An Earthblood does go down as I get all my knights into the AoE. So we're going to get a nice little heal there. You can see Grail Knights, they're dying. They're getting wrecked. Honestly, they're taking a lot of damage, and yet they're still running amok. These Sisters of Avalon are destroyed. And I know that once my opponent loses his archers, once these Sisters are off the field, nothing else is going to matter. My opponent over here does get a few hits in on the Peasant Bowman because I overextend. I didn't have him on guard mode. Bit of a mistake. Fey Enchantress here slaying out with the Mage of Life, once again showing that she does have some melee proficiency, especially on the charge. She's got 74 charge bonus. For my opponent, a bit of a disaster here. The Sisters of Avalon are getting chased down. They're getting run down by these angry Grail Knights. This is really not what you want happening. My opponent's army, once this formation broke, it's essentially game over. Now, there's still a minute on the game, but on the match, and I'm going to fast forward through most of it because there simply isn't that much to say, really. You can see over here we're just going to bog down the White Lions, overwhelm them from all sides, hit them with Grail Guardians, hit them with Men-at-Arms, push Archers up. Even the Swordmasters against focused archery fire are not going to last forever. We're going to run the Sisters off the field. You can see they do chip away still a little bit at these Grail Knights. They try. They're trying their little hearts out. They get hit by Lance Formation. Bit overkill. I should have spread them out into a normal box. Everqueen's Court Guard here on 8 models, about to get hit in the back by the Fey Enchantress. Arcane Conduit going away. You can see the Everqueen's Court Guard shatter. Now the last 30 or so seconds, you can see that just these guys are getting shredded. My opponent tries to use an Earthblood there to keep himself afloat. Some Grail Knights here, mauled, but at this point it's just GG as my opponent's army is essentially out of troops. No shooting, handful of spears left if we go out into the... you can see all my opponent really had was a handful of Swordmasters and his 2 Lords, one of which was in horrible shape. Fighting Grail Guardians is never good for most of these high elf heroes like this. So why do I want to demonstrate this match? A few things. First of all, this is one of the worst matchups in the game. I want to discuss some possible options for what you can do as a high elf player if you're dealing with this. If you're dealing with Brettonia, because it's a very difficult matchup, I think. Brettonia is in a really solid spot against high elves, to put it mildly. Grail Knights beat the majority of high elf troops pretty decisively. They'll beat your cav, they'll beat your flyers, they'll beat your infantry into pulp. This was nowhere near a perfect game. This was, honestly, quite frankly, the way I played in this game was miserable. I lost an entire unit of Grail Knights, 1,500 gold, because I YOLO'd in straight into spears. It was basically like an Imperial Guard strat or something. I don't know. It was a really stupid strat. It was orc level strats. Had I been playing more conservatively, more intelligently, I would have probably disengaged 2 knights on the flanks, had them sit outside of range, get 2 more knights to go in from the back. That way I could have outflanked my opponent's position, and that would have been the way to go, and that would have been the intelligent thing to do, and that was not what I did in this matchup. I got greedy, I was feeling overconfident, but honestly, as the match showed, perfectly viable, legitimately confident. Brettonia is just that good against high elves. So what can you? So now, granted, some of the things my opponent did here could have been done differently. Swordmaster of Hoth, I don't think are a good pick at all. If you're going to bring anything against Brettonia, bring Phoenix Guard. They're still better than Swordmasters if you're doing this sort of infantry blob. And this is not what I would recommend at all. The problem with this is that once your flanks fold, and they will, once you get overwhelmed by cav, even if I just throw one unit of Grail Knights to break your brace, and then a second unit of Grail Knights to just pile through, you're doomed once they got on top, especially because you need to keep your sisters so close to Lithanar to get that benefit of the range of the rate of fire. From him and the Handmaiden, you're going to be so boxed up, you're going to get annihilated by a calf charge like this. So, plus you're going to be very susceptible to peasant bowmen. My opponent that whole time was just letting the peasant bows wail on him. These guys got almost over 60 kills, most of those against Sisters of Avalorn, which is ridiculous. This is a dirt cheap unit. This is a 450 gold unit against the 1100, I think, of Sisters of Avalorn. It's even more on the Evergreen scorecard. It's like 1400, I think. So these guys are getting huge value. It's like if you let Ungor Bowman or something tear apart your line. So it's rough. So what do you do? And good game to my opponent. Cool build. Good try. Not bad. But what would I recommend if you were trying to deal with this as high elf player? Because I do think this is a tough matchup, and that was the main reason I wanted to demonstrate that battle. Is just to show how terrible the Brettonian player can screw up, how badly he can play. And I played horrible that game. I'm not going to try to sugarcoat it. That was bad play. And yes, my opponent made some mistakes of his own. That is certain. He probably should have gone after my archers, for example, once he breached one flank, stuff like that. But despite that, I won pretty handily. And why is that? What can you do differently? One of the odd things that you can try to get away with against Brettonia is to beat them in the cav game. This might seem like a little risky, might seem perhaps even like a little stupid, because Brettonia does, of course, have really good cav. But interesting enough, Dragon Princes, especially like Fireborn, despite the fact that, of course, their physical resist won't hold up to Grail Knights. But if you go heavy on cav, you can actually give Brettonia a bit of a run for its money. The reason being, Dragon Princes, due to their very high stats, as long as they've got Martial Mastery up, will actually trade very cost-effective. They'll trade 1-to-1 with Grail Knights in a straight-up fight. Until their Martial Mastery expires. Once their Martial Mastery expires, they tend to fall apart horribly because their melee defense it crumbles. The Brettonian Grail Knights, if we do a quick comparison here, side by side, if we just compare the units, and do keep in mind there's Martial Mastery involved, but we do a quick comparison of Grail Knights versus Dragon Princes. Dragon Princes have an advantage at everything except melee attack. But that is getting boosted up a huge amount by Martial Mastery, by Martial, and so with the boost from Martial Mastery, they can even things out. The Grail Knights do have that bonus for Large, which is meant to compensate, and they do have magic damage, which bypasses the physical resistance. Dragon Princes, on the other hand, Dragon Princes do have more armor. So honestly, tit for tat, the two units are very similar. The only problem starts when Dragon Princes lose their Martial Mastery, and then they suddenly come down to a very bad spot. So you need to avoid that. One of the things you can do is try to go with Techless, and you can bring Kindle Flame. This is actually one of the interesting things. One of the cool things you can do, and I think can be pretty useful, is they bring a strategy like this with Techless. Don't bother with this stuff. You could do Scroll of Hoeth. To be fair, this is not a terrible. If you decide, honestly, if you want to say snipe out a unit of knights, if you end up going against a strat similar to mine, and that's really the scariest strat, I think, if you're playing as high elves. That's the strat you need to be worried about most. A Scroll of Hoeth can be a good choice. Why, you might ask? Well, because if your opponent decides to bring Fey Enchantress, and he's trying to cast spells on his Grail Guardians or Grail Knights to keep him alive in that cavalry fight, you want your you want to be able to prevent that. In Scroll of Hoeth, extra 30 seconds of ability to recharge, that can be the difference between winning a fight and losing it, especially once you throw other spells into the fight like Enfeebling Foe. So that's a little bit of an oddball choice there, but it can be good. Otherwise, probably go with two nobles. It's a very good pick just because they have armor piercing and anti-large. That's obviously very good against the Brettonians. I don't think you can really argue against that. Now, how do you flesh out the rest of your force? You've got about 3,600 gold left, and obviously you do not have the cost efficiency of Brettonia. I don't think anybody can argue that. There are a few options. You can go with, say, a Frostheart Phoenix. This can be surprisingly, it might seem like an odd choice, but it can be a surprisingly decent choice. a decent choice. The reason being that the Frostart Phoenix does, and you can see if you can barely, we can probably cut some corners somewhere to get an extra unit of spears on the field, or we can cut that, there we go, get like 3 spears. That can be your front line essentially. Just because all you need is an anvil that'll tie down Brettonian infantry for a while. If your opponent goes very infantry heavy, you can just run him over with Dragon Princes. That's honestly not that much of a problem. But Frostart Phoenix can be a decent pick. Why? It provides that AoE debuff, it's -9 melee attack, the armor piercing not that relevant against Brettonians. It does magic damage of its own, which is good because it can, because with its own magic damage, it can bypass the defenses on, say, Grail Knights, who of course do have that built-in physical resist. The other big problem, of course, with Grail Knights is that they do have perfect vigor, which is another one of those factors that's not honestly hidden, but it's in there, and can make a big difference in the long run as well. But basically, you're trying to shock and awe the Brettonian into oblivion here with a bunch of Dragon Princes with some Fireborn. You can also drop the Frostart Phoenix, try to get in an extra unit of Dragon Princes. You can even maybe not bother with Dragon Princes, just keep it at, say, 1600. Throw 2 units of White Lions in there. There's a bunch of little things you can do like this. I'm not going to say all of them are necessarily smart. I wouldn't bother with, say, archers. If your opponent does bring, say, mounted yeomen, something gimmicky like that, it's going to be rough, but you can always net them. One of the cool things is that with tech lists, if they do gimmicks, you can hit them with a net, and then run them over with Fireborn and Dragon Princes, if you really need that to happen. You try to isolate your opponent. You use nets to prevent your opponent from reinforcing crucial parts of the line. You hit casters with Scroll of Hoth to deny them the ability recharges. You hit your main target with Enfeebling Foe to make it weaker. If you see units that are falling apart, you hit them with a regrowth. You can use Flaming Sword of Ruin to counteract enemy physical resist and get some extra damage, especially when it's stacked on Kindle Flame. And with this sort of build, you can really give Brettonia a run for its money. This is my opinion. I do hope this wasn't too ranty. I do hope this is a little helpful, because I do think this is one of the tougher matchups out there. But with Techless as support, and with all these spells going down, you can deal with the cavalry, and you can deal with the cavalry contingent. You don't have anything that's really vulnerable to cav. You don't have any backline to be compromised. And Brettonia is such bad infantry that if you can win the cav fight, you can have a trash remaining force and still do well. Fiery Convocation, cycle charging from Dragon Princes, it'll do the trick. If you can get rid of their flyers and their cav, you're basically set. That's my 2 cents. Otherwise, an alternate build that I'm not as fond of using, but it can also work, is to bring bolt throwers. And I think this is a bit of a riskier one. You can bring 2 bolt throwers, say maybe in 3. If you're feeling a little risky, you can bring like Phoenix Guard, maybe Keepers of the Flame nowadays. This used to be a strat I ran more often back in the day, more so than I do now. Oddly enough, instead of bringing Techless, I actually don't bother with Techless. I used to bring Tyrion, because Tyrion is surprisingly, he's survivable. He's quick and he can do some good hurt. Throw Heart of Avalorn, throw his survivability on there. Ditch the nobles. You can do something like that, and bring a Caster of Light on a horse. No exorcism, of course. Bring some spells. You can bring, say, a single unit of. You can bring, say, you can bring a noble, help Tyrion out a little bit in close quarters. Then for the rest of your line, you can be a bunch of spears who will deal with, the usual Brettonian crap troops. And then, say, a unit of like Fireborn. I used to do this with Dragon Princes, of course, the normal variant, but you can do a build sort of like this. You have your Phoenix Guard basically parked on the Eagle Claw Bolt Thrower. Use the Eagle Claw Bolt Thrower to chip away at the enemy cav. It's a very tedious, and honestly, I don't think this is as competitive build, but it can work as well to an extent. You basically have tools. Once again, Tyrion can mop up infantry pretty well. You can deny the enemy cav. If you can deny the enemy cav from getting on your Eagle Claw Bolt Thrower, you're basically set. Mage of Light, of course, providing those nets. You can drop the chevrons and the spears and put a Star Wars staff on her, or Book of Hoth. Either way, it doesn't really matter. But either of those are pretty good. And those would be my recommendations. And this second build is more of an iffy. This one's a little more of an iffy build. This is something I used to do more back in the day. I would honestly recommend the more cav heavy build. So that's my 2 cents. I do hope you find that helpful. I do hope if you do like to play High Elves and you struggle with Brettonia because it is a tough matchup, I hope this helps you. As usual, guys, if you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't subscribed if you have not already. If you have any comments, any criticism, any questions about the game, anything like that, be sure to share them, and I will respond as soon as I can. As usual, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.